Thank you everyone for joining this session. I'll take this opportunity to share my views about how we see the markets currently from an AI perspective, what kind of opportunity it throws for the AIF industry. And also we'll take an opportunity to exchange views because a lot of you would be investing with various companies, would be having existing portfolio, you would have your own perspective. So, maybe during the Q&A, we will have a benefit of also knowing your perspective. So we'll keep it interactive maybe after I do some of the initial discussion. So as we all know, these are unprecedented times and we have not seen anything of this sort in our professional career, or even for that matter, even before our professional career and so on. The only thing which we witnessed was, to some extent, the global financial crisis during 2008, which was very different in a way from what we are seeing currently. Currently, it is more of, health crisis touching somewhere around 180 countries globally, and leading to some kind of economic and financial crisis for most of the countries. So in a way, quite different. Uncertain times, the only certainty we see at the moment is continued uncertainty. The reason being, as we all know, ultimately, if we have to get into estimating growth, how the markets would be, how the corporate performance would be, what kind of investment cycle will pick up, the deployment part of it, the exit part of it, everything, eventually will come to somewhere linked to the timing part of it. And timing is largely driven by when the vaccine will be out, when we will have a solution across the globe. Just having solution for few countries through lockdown, I think it helps that country to a large extent, no doubt about it. But eventually for a crisis of this sort, even we will need vaccine and we'll need a solution which is across the globe. So, if we rewind and we go back to calendar year 2019, 2019, whereas, the private equity industry is concerned, was a very landmark year. Just as a clarification, I will keep using the term AIF private equity, but when I use the term AIF strictly, it doesn't mean only those who are registered with the SEBI here and having domestic source of capital and so on. That's not the intent. So 2019 was a very landmark year where we saw approximately $48 billion getting invested in India, which is significantly higher than what we saw in 2018 or some of the other years and so on. In fact, it was approximately 30% higher in terms of value, and again, similarly 30-35% higher in terms of volume compared to calendar year 2018. And in 2019, when we look back, though we call it a landmark year, whereas this kind of investment flowing to the corporate India is concerned. At the same time, when we do a health check about the economy, we all know, I mean, quarter by quarter, the GDP was disappointing. We were not satisfied with the growth. There was a concern around the unemployment rate going up. There was a concern around investment cycle was not picking up to our satisfaction. And there was also concern around the credit growth, whereas banking and the industry credit is concerned tapering down. In addition to that, there were other complications post the IL&FS crisis, where we saw some of the other private banks, some of the other NBFCs getting into all sorts of financial complication, all sorts of complication with the regulator. Maybe some of them are still struggling to find a resolution. Maybe one of them have found a resolution, but yet to deliver outcomes and so on. The point being, there was some kind of a challenge or uncertainty around the financial health of the banking system of, banking come non-banking finance companies and so on. So in spite of those challenges, we saw 2019 was a landmark year with 30% uptick in investment flowing to corporate India, $48 billion investment. And that was also a landmark year from a perspective of additional fundraising. If I correctly remember, around 11 to $12 billion got raised in 2019 calendar year, which again was relatively higher compared to the previous year. Now, when we get into dissecting the previous year, we would notice, significant investment has flown in segments like infrastructure, real estate, consumer-led businesses, including consumer finance, healthcare, IT, e-commerce, fintech. These are some of the businesses where a significant amount of investment came in. Now, when we, of course, in which one can argue, is it truly AIF or it is outside AIF? So I'm not getting into the regulatory part of it. But the point being, we saw significant investment coming from pension funds, sovereign funds, and they were all looking at long-term yield assets. And that's where a lot of, road assets, a lot of other infrastructure yielding assets, commercial real estate, saw a lot of foreign capital getting deployed there. So this is what we saw in 2019. In addition to that, 2019, when we talk about from an AIF or private investment perspective, and we think from private credit perspective, there were a lot of expectations in last couple of years around IBC. When the law was introduced, people said it's a very stringent law with very tight timeline. There's a commitment from the government, there's a commitment from the banking industry, the central bank here. And we should see a positive outcome coming from that process. We'll find the process to be efficient. But incidentally, we saw there were a lot of legal complications which we witnessed, and those legal complications led to delay in processes. It led to delay in outcomes. It has also led to a delay in form of whether eventually the outcome will be there or not. Like for example, last few weeks we have been coming across news where some of the resolution applicants had submitted the resolution plan with certain pricing valuation to buy out some of the assets, but now they are having a second thought whether they should remain committed to those resolution plan or whether they should look at revisiting or even including backing out from that. So from a credit perspective, of course, IBC was a significant I would say regulatory reform introduced in 2016. We expected there will be a lot of good outcomes in 2019. We did see some of the large cases getting resolved, but eventually when we look at holistically, maybe the outcome may not be to one's satisfaction. When we look at again, banking versus the non-banking finance companies, the rough figures would be approximately around 100 lakh credit coming from the banking industry, around 25 to 28 lakh crore coming from the NBFC segment. So post ILFS, we have seen the NBFC segment turning overcautious. Banks turned overcautious in terms of their credit lines to NBFCs. There were certain issues raised around the rating of the portfolio. And therefore, we saw, there was not much of a growth coming from the NBFC side. So I think last year it would have been maybe close to around a 2% kind of a growth, which was more like a nominal number. And of course, currently, leaving the growth aside, we all know the kind of challenges the segment is facing in terms of liquidity, in terms of getting further credit lines from the banking industry and so on. So, this was more in the Indian context. I think it was important to touch upon how 2019 was. And also from a global perspective, the growth rate was coming down. There was a US-China trade war, which had eventually not got resolved. There were hopes, somewhere it will get addressed in a phased manner, but it also had a lot of political angle to it, given that US is also likely to get into elections and so on. And then in addition to that, we also had the Brexit as, again, a major global event where, in the European Union, we saw a lot of complication, particularly in UK, including, the change at the leadership and so on. So the point I'm making is we saw a phase of 2019 where not everything was good domestically, not everything was good in the international market, but the show continued and we saw significant investment coming to India. Now, coming to the current situation, I think what we saw in 2008, we can to some extent relate to that. So in 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, if I correctly remember, almost the value of the investment dropped by 50%. And this was largely driven by the fact that most of the GPs got deeply concerned and involved with their existing portfolio company. So therefore, one may argue saying that in 2008, which is just a decade back, when there was a financial crisis, we saw a significant dip, a 50% dip in terms of investment flowing to the corporate sector. Even today, though we may talk about there would be a capital need with the corporate India, both on the equity side, the debt side, the MES side, I think without any true opinion, most of the corporates will need some source of capital. Having said that, if we leave for the moment banks and NBFCs aside, the AIF community would be also concerned about their existing exposure and would like to spend quality time, get a bit more engaged and deeply involved with their portfolio company and see what best they can do, not only provide capital, but also value add in terms of doing handholding during this difficult times. So one can relate to this two situation, what we are seeing currently and what we saw in 2008. The second reason in 2008 why we saw a significant dip in investment was also because there was a lot of volatility and uncertainty. And that volatility and uncertainty also led to mismatch, particularly in terms of the valuation expectation between the buyer and seller. Companies and the management always thought it's a short-term event, and why should we, give away our assets or get diluted at significant discount to what we had seen just a few months back and so on. And at the same time, the investors thought, there is a financial crisis, liquidity has a value, we are getting into an uncertain market, we are willing to take a risk, and the risk has to be priced properly, and we would look at what the current valuation is. We are not willing to pay significant premium otherwise. So again, something very similar, where we have seen, if we take the capital markets or the stock market as an indicator. So from 42,000, the peak index, we have seen, it coming down to something like around 26,000 a few weeks back, and back to somewhere around 32,000 now, which basically means the valuations have dropped significantly. So there could be a possibility where, again, there could be expectation, a mismatch between those who are willing to provide capital and those who need capital. In 2008, when we talk about a significant drop in terms of the value and the number of deals, it was not only on the equity side where, as I said, there was an issue on the valuation expectation, but that was also true on the private credit side. But of course, India at that point in time, the private credit number were not that significant. I think, last year we had somewhere close to around $3 billion, maybe a bit more than that. But in 2008, it was not a very significant number. So the impact was not felt that high. And the other change was, banks were quick in India to come back and start giving credit. So therefore, till 2013-14, we saw tremendous credit growth from the banking system, which may or may not be the case currently. Whatever we are seeing for last 2 to 3 months, we all know, though there's an ample liquidity being made available to the banking industry. Banks are worried about their existing credit exposures. They also believe there is an uncertainty, and when the uncertainty will turn into some kind of a visibility of normalcy coming back, there's a bit of a question mark in terms of timing and so on. They're also wanting to engage further with their existing portfolio company, see if providing further liquidity can help in ensuring their survival, their growth, rather than taking fresh credit exposure. So therefore, we see a lot of liquidity being parked with the central bank, and bank being slightly risk averse in terms of liberally giving credit. So that's again when we compare this with what we saw post 2008. There's a slight change. Of course, this is based on what we have seen for last maybe couple of months. Maybe the situation with banks may undergo a change with intervention of the government, RBI, some more comfort being given, or some kind of a risk sharing mechanism being put in place between the government and the banks and so on. But that's what it seems currently. They are risk averse. What we also saw as a change between 2008 and now, over a period of time, the number of buyout deals have gone up, significantly gone up. The investment manager, the fund manager believes, taking control of businesses, putting professional management, helping them to grow this business over a period of time could be a better value proposition for their investors compared to having a minority investment in a company. Which also basically means number of buyout funds many a times goes for a leverage buyout. And therefore, it raises a question whether we will see similar kind of deals happening. Of course, from a supply perspective, there's a huge opportunity that would be available to the fund managers from the corporate side. But in terms of their risk appetite, in terms of their ability to put a leverage buyout to an extent what we saw in the past, or maybe still the deals will happen, but the leverage may be relatively low compared to what we had seen earlier. In 2008, we also came across instances where the GP community had challenges with the LP community where though they had commitments, but some of the commitments were revisited by them, which basically means they had to curtail the fund size, curtail the portfolio, so their ability to write check certainly got impacted with the crisis in 2008. Now, currently, what we are seeing is, one is, of course, you have AIFs, which are domestic AIF, you're raising capital from the domestic market, where it's a combination of institutional and non-institutional investors. One will have to wait and watch, what would be the behavior of the non-institutional investors. Of course, institutional investors, once they've committed, we expect them to continue with their commitment. But non-institutional investors, given that they would have seen significant erosion of their wealth across, whether it is their investment in their own business, whether it is to do with they investing certain capital in real estate or an equity market, mutual fund industry, I think from across asset class, they would have seen wealth getting eroded. And the second reason being, some of them may also see an opportunity in the listed space. So when they believe the listed space has got significantly corrected, to an extent of 30–40%, and there's an opportunity to make good returns in the stock market or through mutual fund industry itself. So is there a need to get into a relatively non-liquid asset class where they have to remain committed for certain number of years and so on? So I think somewhere we will see some trade-off happening there. The other change we are seeing this time is when we talk about 2008 financial crisis, and we saw some of the global LPs wanting to curtail their commitment to the fund manager. This time, the oil is a critical factor, though we may say, oil correcting is very good for India from, CAT perspective, from our BOP perspective, and given that the tax revenues will be down, and given that the oil prices have come down, government will be in a position to compensate to an extent by increasing excise collections and so on. So certainly there is a positive. India benefits as a country when the oil gets corrected. If we get into a rough math, at $35, approximate saving to the country is $35 billion. So it's a very significant number. But having said that, when oil gets corrected, it does impact some of the countries, globally. And some of these countries, particularly the Middle East region, has got a lot of sovereign funds, and the source of capital is oil business. So one will have to wait and watch, as we discussed during last year, calendar year 2019, we saw significant amount of capital flowing from pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, in a lot of yield assets and also other pies. One will have to wait and watch whether a similar kind of a capital flow and commitment would come in post a significant drop in oil prices from geographies, particularly where their economy is dependent upon the oil business. Having said that, whereas domestic numbers are concerned, AIF as an industry has been growing. It will continue to grow. approximately, I think 340,000 crore was raised in form of commitment. Of course, the actual capital raised from those commitment is almost 50% of that. And almost 80% of that 50% has been deployed. We believe overall the journey will continue, whereas the domestic industry is concerned in terms of commitment coming from institutional investors, commitment coming from family offices, HNIs. There could be a temporary phase where they may do some trade-off between capital markets versus AIF and so on. But directionally, I think if we talk about medium to long term, we believe we'll see capital flow coming to this segment. Except that I think there are a couple of very critical factors for the government to look into this for the growth of this industry. And government has also witnessed, last a good number of years, the kind of private investment which has flown through FDI route, also through InvITs and so on. I think there's a good learning with the government there. And like we developed our own mutual fund industry, if you compare what mutual fund industry is today compared to what it was a decade back, I think a similar growth is required for the AIF industry. So a couple of points which government certainly should continue, should look into it. And as we keep saying, whenever there's a crisis as a country, that's where we look at reforms, we look at changing some of the regulations and so on. So one is, particularly on the private credit side, and I'll come to, the opportunities that exist within AIF2 on the private credit side. But given what we saw even a week, 10 days back, where one of the mutual fund house had to take a decision to close down, wind up their credit funds, given that there was a point in time when SEBI stepped in and said, whereas loan against shares, last transactions are concerned, we don't believe the mutual fund industry, the retail industry has that kind of appetite from a risk perspective. So therefore, they increased the minimum cover one should look at, and they said, it should be based on a 4x kind of a number, which basically said, we don't encourage mutual fund to look at those kind of investment opportunities anymore. So, the point I'm making is, if you look at private credit as an asset class within AIF2, there is a significant tax implication there. Particularly for the HNIs, family offices, and currently we all know, whereas the domestic fundraising is concerned, there's a significant amount of capital which comes in from that community. So, though it's a pass-through status means, you're earning the interest income in the hands of the investors, and most of them would get taxed at, depending upon whether every year they have 2 crore plus or a 5 crore plus. Paying some 43% tax on that income after getting into investing in a illiquid asset class, committing for long term, taking certain risk, and then being subject to that kind of a tax. So there's also a tax disparity between the credit instrument that exists in AIF versus what existed within the MF industry. So governments should certainly look into that aspect so that we see more flows coming and in a way, the corporate India benefiting out of it. The other relevant point, there's no true opinion given the current crisis, as we see normalcy coming back even before that. There'll be a lot of corporates on street asking for capital, whether it is in form of equity, debt, or any hybrid instrument. They would need that for their survival, for growth, for whatever. Having said that, when we dissect the source of capital into 4 buckets, and this is something which I think is a structural issue, particularly in the Indian context. So we have the private capital source, which we call it private equity or AIF. Then we have the banking industry. The third is we have NBFCs, and the fourth is we have capital market as a source. Now, as we discussed about 2019, and we said significant amount of capital went to either long-term yield assets, which basically means the asset was created, someone had taken the exposure, and currently someone is coming in and just buying it for the purpose of yield without taking a project risk. Then we saw, significant amount of equity capital flowing to e-commerce, IT, fintech, consumer businesses, healthcare, and whatnot. But when we compare this equity flow with credit flow, you'll find there's a mismatch there. So significant amount of credit flow, particularly from banks, goes to manufacturing sector. Now, manufacturing may include steel, it may include textile, it may include pharmaceuticals, and so on, or maybe auto components or whatever. The question is, if someone wants to put a new project, say a cement plant for 1 million ton, a steel plant, a greenfield project of 1 or 2 million ton, or for that matter, a yarn manufacturing unit and so on. Would these businesses get external equity? At what stage they will be able to access this equity either through private equity source or through capital markets? It's possible only when they grow to a certain level and not before that. No private equity guy would be interested in investing in some yarn manufacturing unit or some sponge making unit or some rolling mill or a small cement plant and so on. So the point being, we talk about credit growth, which is required for the economy. With credit growth, you need proportionate equity to come in. And we all know when it comes to capital intensive businesses, particularly the mid-size segment, promoters don't have that kind of equity to bring in. They definitely need some external equity support, which doesn't exist structurally. So, though we are talking about the credit growth having dropped significantly, but the credit growth has not dropped only because of COVID-19. It started dropping even few quarters before that. There was liquidity in the banking system. Maybe the liquidity was not to an extent what we are seeing currently, which is around 6 lakh, 7 lakh crore. But certainly there was a liquidity. So the limited point being, if you see structurally, we have introduced IBC. We have more stringent monitoring by the banks on the credit side. And then we have private equity community, which would not like to invest in certain segments of manufacturing. It becomes very difficult to connect these dots. The way the entrepreneur would think is, if I have to put up a new steel project, a greenfield project, and I go for a leverage of 2x, that means I'm responsible for this entire source of capital, which is not only I'm taking exposure to or putting my equity capital at risk, but I'm also liable for this credit exposure in form of personal guarantees, corporate guarantees, some personal assets to be pledged and so on. And for some reason, if the project doesn't take off, I'm responsible for this 3x and not for 1x. And that will also have shadow on my existing businesses, because some bank will take my company under IBC and so on. So this is a structural issue. I don't have an answer. Of course, we know, as fund managers on private equity side, we look for certain filtration criteria in form of ROE, in form of margins, and we may not be interested in certain commodity businesses and so on. So therefore, it may not meet our return expectation. So therefore, of course, we cannot change our investment strategy moving to investing in manufacturing of commodities and so on. But the limited point I was making was there is a structural issue in the industry, and somewhere the regulator and the government will have to look into correcting this structural issue. I remember if we go back a few decades, we used to have development financial institutions. And those development financial institutions, which were not listed commercial banks, used to look at long-term funding for 12 years, 15 years, low interest rate. Basically the objective was to promote industry. They were not looking at, what will be the quarterly profit and so on. And those financial institutions used to also support this company with some kind of a minority. Today, if we look at domestically, what kind of financial institutions we have, we struggle. And this structure will have its implication on the financial market and particularly on the private credit side. So therefore, that point is relevant more from a private credit perspective, not only just from equity perspective, because of course, equity may not flow into that segment and so on. So coming back to the current pandemic, as I said, very difficult to put a timing, when the normalcy will return, but hopefully, the vaccine should be there in, 8 to 10 months, going by what news we see in the market. And certainly from a 1 year beyond perspective, we see a great opportunity in terms of economy slowly coming back to normalcy. We'll see, at least a positive growth rate in India compared to what fear we have for a lot of geographies otherwise. I mean, in G20 again, as of now, even if, I know Moody's revisited the growth rate and they said it's virtually zero for India. But still the government expects it would be around 1.5% in this fiscal year. But the point being, in G20, again, we will still be positive. We may not be negative, even if not a number which is a very happy number. But a lot of other geographies will get into a negative situation, which basically means India will certainly stand out within the emerging market. And we also know the government is currently working towards certain reforms to attract a lot of manufacturing base, which will shift from China to India. So again, that should help in the economy growing. Of course, the risk profile has changed currently. So one will have to price the risk appropriately. And as I said, since the valuation have dropped, I think it's a big opportunity for us as fund managers to deploy as much capital as possible. Of course, we have to remain engaged with our portfolio company, ensure wherever they need our support, we are available to help them, guide them, ensure their survival and growth. But at the same time, it should not so happen we miss the opportunity. Again, if we have to relate back to 2008, I think within less than a year's time, the market were back to 2x. And those who remained under fear lost that big opportunity and were not benefited out of that V-shaped recovery which happened. At the moment, very difficult to say whether it will be V-shaped, W or L. People talk about all sorts of recovery modules there. But certainly, I think things will look good from a medium to long-term perspective. There are a lot of good things being done otherwise, structurally, whereas the government is concerned. I think one of the announcement we are all waiting is on the fiscal package side. But at the same time, we have to also remember, government has very limited scope of generating revenue. They have to keep something in their pocket. 2 months have gone. in 2 months, certainly corporates would have lost, of course, the potential profit. And in terms of cost, they would have lost money in form of paying employees, maybe some minimum electricity charges or some rent and so on. But the government is working towards that. I think some of the other announcement we should see in phases. Our fiscal package cannot be the same as what we have seen, US or Japan or UK for that matter announcing. We don't have that kind of scope or appetite to borrow and having an impact on our rating and so on, our sovereign rating. But I think the government is working on that, and I think it's a matter of time. We should see some more news flowing. So, if we have to summarize, currently the situation is also slightly different in the sense that we are seeing 4 kind of shocks. The demand side, the supply side, the health side, and also on the oil side. Oil is again a very, very critical factor from a global perspective for the reasons we discussed. So when we talk about an opportunity for AIF, as I said, across all asset class, I think one should keep eyes and ears open. One should be a bit more aggressive in spotting good opportunities from a medium and long-term perspective. One of the asset class we firmly believe will have, would be very attractive and have very good potential is on the private credit side. On the private credit side, the market has been growing for last few years, $3 to $4 billion. And within this private credit side, it's a combination of both performing credit, which could be yield, or it could be short-term credit, or long-term yield assets, or short-term credit, or it could be even, for that matter, distressed assets and so on. In fact, last calendar year, top 5 fundraising which has happened for funds which are having India as a dedicated target. Out of 5, 4 are distressed asset fund, which includes names like the Piramal, Bain, Kotak, Edel, and so on. So a huge opportunity there. And this is a segment which provides flexible capital in form of end use, structuring, repayment can be customized to certain events, or the ability of the company to pay and so on. Also, some of the manufacturing segment I mentioned where they may have difficulty in sourcing capital in form of equity, maybe, some of the private credit kind of structures may be able to play a role there. But as I said, making it tax efficient is very critical. And also, I think what will be important for this asset class is to also look at a combination of debt and equity rather than just looking at credit for the reasons I shared. One of the reason, today we are seeing this kind of crisis, apart from, of course, starting from health and then coming to finance, but within finance, we all know a number of corporates are over leveraged. They're leveraged at all levels. Whether there are SPVs, whether there are operating companies, whether there are holding companies. I mean, there's a leverage at all levels. So that's also because of the reason, because adequate equity was not available in the right form and at the right time, at the right price. And banks were supporting businesses with credit. There were NBFCs chasing growth, and NBFCs, wanting to make high yield, wanting to take higher risk, so were willing to provide those over leverage to corporate India, to the promoters, and so on. So therefore, it is important. It's a learning. Some of this fund should look at their business model and see if they can participate as a combination of credit and having some kind of equity play in those companies, so that they can manage their risk well. So I will stop with this. I think it will be good to get into knowing your perspective, and I'm sure many of us will have a lot of questions for clarification. So happy to get into that.
Sure, sir. So there are a few questions already. So I'll just start with the first question from Sanjay Mehta. He's asking for existing investment, what kind of hit AIF industry may get? Do you think by just pumping money in system will revive economy?
So very difficult to say what kind of a hit the AIF industry would take, for the simple reason, that kind of a data in an organized form is not available. But if we have to look at two other data points, which I'm not sure whether they're strictly comparable, but still for the sake of information. Already, we are aware there's a concern being expressed by certain rating agencies, certain officials of the bank. On the credit side, we may see a significant jump in NPA with the banking system. So we are talking about from a 9.5%, it could move anywhere beyond 14-15% kind of a number, and some of them are saying it could even be 2x. So that's one, kind of indication. The second is on the capital market side. We know, from a peak of 42,000, we are down to 32,000. I don't know. I mean, the markets keep oscillating, so like a pendulum. So I don't know what the bottom is, and when there would be a V kind of a curve, whereas the capital markets are concerned. But if that's an indication, I mean, to that extent, some of the private equity guys wanting to exit from their current portfolio company, either wanting to do strategic sale, pass it on to other private equity investor, take the company to capital markets, I mean, whichever mode of exit, somewhere there would be some kind of a benchmarking linked to the capital markets. So therefore, there could be an implication whereas the valuations are concerned.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, overall global economies were weak now post COVID-19 situation worsen further. As per your view, what kind of steps, actions can revive private equity as well as capital market?
What can revive private equity and capital market? I think that's directly linked to the revival of economy. So assuming, the stress goes beyond what is being assumed today. I think most of the countries will see a central bank of the respective countries coming forward and providing all sorts of monetary support, all sorts of fiscal support. I think it is more to do with providing support to the businesses, and once the businesses revive, there's an employment, there's a collection of tax, although it would automatically get reflected, whereas the AIF industry and the capital market is concerned. I mean, things like someone saying for capital market revival, should we get into again, say, exempting capital gains tax and so on. So I'm not sure whether that's an option today. I mean, government also needs revenue. Government also believes, when they look at the profile of the taxpayers, the capital gains from the stock market is largely to certain income class, certain urban class. So therefore, they should be contributing a bit towards the taxes and so on. So, I mean, largely whatever measures, whether globally or India, the government will take, I think the focus would be to ensure business revival, employment, and then automatically that would get reflected, whereas capital markets or AIF industry is concerned. Having said that, from India perspective, I think it is very important for us to attract capital from the global markets. So, a couple of things what we discussed, today we have slightly better edge compared to China. some of the businesses are likely to shift. There's also concern being expressed by a lot of countries in terms of the source of virus, whether it was the Yuan market or whether it was a lab. So all sorts of concerns being raised there. So government should certainly, look into land reforms, labor reform to attract those investments here. In addition to that, something similar to what we saw, an announcement in last budget where for infrastructure yield assets, they said if sovereign funds are investing and they gave a specific exemption, particularly to ADIA, some such innovative regulatory measures would certainly help in terms of attracting capital, whereas India is concerned, and that attracting capital, that liquidity will also help supporting markets.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Jitendra. What impact do we see of this COVID crisis on AIF2 investments, along with tax impact from recent budget changes?
So the impact of COVID on AIF, I think we just covered that in the previous question, right? So whereas the current tax impact is concerned, I mean, there is I would say there is a challenge, particularly on the category 3 side, where you have hedge funds, investing in listed equity and so on. So you have a pass-through, whereas Cat 1 is concerned, you have a pass-through in Cat 2. So eventually, depending upon the tax status and the nature of income, the investor is subject to tax. But whereas Cat 3 is concerned, still there is no pass-through there. And given that there is no pass-through there, which basically means the person will be subject to, if of course it's capital gains, is subject to capital gains tax, but whereas the surcharge is concerned, he will be subject to the highest bracket of surcharge. And for some reason, some of the hedge fund, the way they are structured and the kind of regular trading they may undertake, if the income is subject to, business income and so on, I think the view which they have taken is they would be paying the maximum slab rate, which is 43% tax. That would make that asset class very unattractive when an investor would compare that with PMS or investing on the mutual fund side. I think the other point from a tax perspective, as I said, on the private credit side, for that segment to grow, I think government should certainly look at tweaking the tax laws and see if more private wealth can flow to that segment, and in turn, that segment can help corporate India and also, support the industry where there's a gap created by the mutual fund or the non-banking finance companies.
Sure, sir. The next question is from Ashish. When banks are shying away from funding the MSME sector, do you think AIF can play an important role in funding this sector?
So yes, MSME to a large extent is already getting supported by AIF industry. So, if we go by MSME definition, what's the legal definition? It talks about certain investment in plant and machinery. So it has got two buckets, manufacturing and service industry. And it says, whereas manufacturing is concerned, they have given various slabs and it goes up to a maximum of 10 crore investment in plant and machinery. Similarly, then you have service industry where the maximum investment in equipment could be up to 5 crore. Now, having said that, some of this business model are not just small industrial workshops or very unorganized kind of setup. I'm not saying there would be a number of them, but that community also has businesses which are not capital intensive businesses, but they are niche businesses. The investment in plant and machinery that is required is relatively low. So therefore, from a definition perspective, they would still fall under that category and still do a certain volume of or value of business or generate certain profitability where they attract investment from AIF industry. In fact, if you go through, just as an indication, if you go through SIDBI Ventures side where they had funds of funds, where the mandate given to them from the government was to invest in funds which eventually will fund MSME segment. You'll find number of them being funded and so on. But certainly that volume can go up, but the challenge is the exit part of it. Many of this MSME will not be of a size where you can expect to get an exit through capital market auction or through an IPO auction. And the second challenge will be many of them may not be of a size or the business would be of a nature where you can take an exit through a strategic option of selling to a strategic buyer. So there are certain challenges around funding them. But having said that, if there is a fund which is not a 5-7 year fund, but willing to take a 10-year kind of investment horizon, I think certainly there is an opportunity. And also, I think the government is further spending time with some of the other agencies, including NSIC and SIDBI, to see how further equity capital can flow into the MSME segment.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Mr. Gupta. Most of the corporate need to get fresh rating before the new funds are infused. No bank or private equity player would put fresh money. What is your view on this?
Sorry, can you just repeat that, please?
Sure. So the question is, most of the corporate need to get fresh rating before the new funds are infused. No bank or private equity player would put fresh money. What is your view on the same?
So again, if you're talking from a private equity investor perspective, I'm not sure why a private equity investor should be too worried about the rating part of it, unless the survival of the corporate depends upon additional capital, certainly coming from the banking industry. And therefore, the rating might be important to have that source of capital. Because private equity capital provider is supposed to have certain risk appetite. He is not always driven by what the credit rating is. And if he is an existing investor in that company, he is in best position to understand the potential of that business, the strength of that management, where are the gaps where they can come in and support those companies to come out of the current crisis and so on. In fact, I would suggest, the fund manager should get a bit more proactive and get involved with the portfolio company rather than playing a bit more passive role and saying, this is what the company needs to deliver to me. So unless it's an exceptional situation where the survival of the company depends upon the credit rating, because the credit needs to come from the banking industry, and therefore a private equity will take a call only if the credit commitment is available, then it's a different thing. Otherwise, I don't see a reason why a private equity investor should be too worried about credit rating.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Next question is from Venkateshwaru. Media talks about 1,000 companies shifting out of China. Do you think India is the beneficiary, and what will be the impact?
So I may not have too much of insights in terms of, out of 1,000 companies, how many companies are currently engaged with the government, at what level, and what kind of discussions going on. But at a very macro level, of course, those companies are also looking at geographies like Vietnam. But the good part is, if you look at some of our fundamentals, the interest rate domestically is coming down. The inflation is under control. The corporate taxes have been reduced significantly. 15% corporate tax for new setup. Just too attractive. I mean, a year back, we would have never even thought the government would do something of this sort. The other structural change is, we have GST now, so which is one nation, one tax. So, less complicated. Many of those companies would also see index like ease of doing business, a significant change. I mean, it's a major achievement for the country, from somewhere 140, 150, we are, to something like 60, 63, and we are expecting it to further come down and so on. A lot of positives. I think two things which currently the government is working upon, and that's very critical for attracting this investment, is land reform and labor reform. As we know, both are subject which are a combination of central and state government. So very complicated in that sense. And as recent as last 2-3 days, we have all read in various medias, some of the NDA ruled states have already taken certain initiatives, whereas the labor reforms are concerned. So I think it's a matter of time. I don't think so the government will let go this opportunity, but I don't have a number out of those 1,000 companies, whether it will be 100 companies, 50 companies, or 500 companies. But certainly we will see India benefiting out of the shift happening out of China. So, in a way we say this is something similar to a Y2K movement, where something we saw during IT, where, today India is a significant player. I think it's clearly an opportunity for us to get into the supply chain, global supply chain.
Thank you. Next question is from Ankit. Which category AIF will be the most impacted due to COVID-19?
So, I think, again, as I said, very difficult to put it category wise. But still, if I have to share my views, I think a couple of things are very important when we look at our portfolio. One is certainly, AIFs who have a business model where they're also investing in companies which are over leveraged, highly leveraged. I think they will certainly get impacted. It would be very difficult for them to plan out their liquidity requirements. The alternate source of liquidity will be limited. So they would certainly get impacted. Number two is those who were largely driven by B2C. And within B2C, it is other than IT driven. Within IT also, there could be some segment, but largely other than IT driven. Say, for example, consumer businesses like food chain. People would have invested in a chain of restaurants, right? Complete lockdown, no revenue. Even if the lockdown is getting lifted, it's getting lifted outside municipal limits. First, the government is supporting, manufacturing companies, infra companies. I don't think so. I mean, we all in this forum today would be willing to take our families out and start dining and wining post the lockdown gets lifted, right? So, and again, this is a segment where there's no option of raising capital from the banking system. I mean, a business like food chain, you have rented premises, you have furniture fixture, you don't have receivables, you don't have stock, no fixed assets. I mean, no bank credit is available. So you are completely dependent upon your equity partner. So to summarize, those who are highly leveraged and those who are largely dependent upon B2C kind of a business model are likely to see getting impacted relatively more compared to others.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Varun. He's asking, while you spoke about AIF being one of the sources for funding projects, what is the level of awareness among investors? And does it have a target segment, or do you think AIF will be available for any category of borrowers? And this, again, the second question is, can you share some of the parameters considered for the segmentation of borrowers?
So, if I understand the question correctly, basically the question is more in context of what I said about the manufacturing sector, saying, you have credit flowing for the projects and so on, but you don't find equity flowing, and maybe, uh, the AIF should also look at equity coming in when they are looking at credit transaction in some of the manufacturing companies and so on. So, the financial parameters are no different. Eventually, it's a commercial deal. The fund manager is having a fiduciary responsibility towards his investors. He has to deliver certain returns. So obviously, he will get into looking at the future expected cash flow of the company, the valuation, whether he's entering at the right price, whether he's going to get compensated for the risk which he is taking. So, what will be the exit options available to him and so on. So nothing specific. I think the more relevant point is, even if, AIF wants to come in and support that segment with equity, we said the private credit market last year was around slightly more than $3 billion. Even if 20% of that comes in form of equity, it's still not a very significant number. I think more importantly, from a equity support perspective, I think the government should certainly explore a possibility of having a couple of large domestic financial institutions which can provide not only long-term credit at cost-effective terms, but also provide equity.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Nilkantan. How do AIF manager go about investing in different avenues? Any common general thumb rule they follow? Second is, has recent debt fund withdrawal by leading MF house, will it have a liquidity crunch in other fund houses too?
So the first one is quite generic. Opportunity for AIF, eventually the business is to deploy capital, help the companies to grow, and as part of that growth journey, you also make your economics out of it, right? So there's an opportunity across. There are opportunities even on the social impact fund, whether it is to do with renewable infrastructure, education, healthcare, and so on. There are opportunities around real estate. There are opportunities around service industry. There's an opportunity whereas category 3 funds in form of listed equities concern and so on. So it all depends, the capability of the fund manager. Not every fund manager has got, skills or a good understanding of every asset class. So depending upon the capability of the manager and depending upon his, LP's mandate to him, I think there's an opportunity across. So difficult to say, one should only follow a particular business model or a particular parameter as such. Sorry, I missed that second question which you said.
Sure, I will repeat. And has recent debt fund withdrawal by leading MF house, will it have a liquidity crunch in other fund houses too?
So, when I think I'm assuming if the question is around MF, it means the other MF fund houses. So, we saw one fund winding up 6 schemes. If I correctly remember the arithmetic, I think the credit risk segment had somewhere around 60,000 crore of overall corpus from the domestic investors. Maybe 5% here and there. I think that has already significantly come down to something around 35 to 40,000 crore. So already we have seen that drop. I think the regulator, all the fund managers, everyone has reached out to investors only because one fund house has decided to wind up six schemes for the reason or the explanation they have cited. That doesn't mean there's a problem with all the fund houses and all the credit schemes, right? So if one particular bank has got high NPA and not doing well, that doesn't mean all the banks are in problem, right? So I don't think so. I think most of the fund houses, mutual fund, they've not gone overboard in terms of taking risk. They've invested in an asset class where the returns are, at the most 10-11% kind of a number. Everyone has been very transparent in terms of disclosing their portfolio to their investors, to the regulator, and so on. Sometimes one episode leads to a lot of panic. So in a way, if you see, we are approximately 3 trillion economy, right? In a 3 trillion economy, some 6 schemes together maybe approximately something like $3 billion or whatever that number would be, $3-4 billion. I mean, it's okay. There's no need for such a panic there.
Sure, sir. Next question is from Deepu. Betting on a vaccination within 8 to 10 months for this pandemic is a pretty long tenure for any economy to bear. In this context, how do you see the potential for gold as an asset class?
So as a fund house, we are a bit positive on gold. I don't have a number to cite saying the gold is currently X and it will be X plus Y. I don't have a number to cite. But directionally, we are positive. I think it's a good hedge to keep, particularly in a situation of this sort. And gold in past have, on many occasions, rewarded investors. So, something like I'm just randomly throwing a number for an indication, something like in a portfolio having a 10% gold exposure, it may be just good to have.
Sure.
In one of our mutual fund scheme, we do have some exposure there.
So the last question is from Mr. Sanjay Mehta. Many experts talking about V-shaped recovery, but if we see 2008 GFC, same was happened. First, global equity market gave V-shaped recovery, then you made new low, and in 2008, economy were working at 30 to 40%, but where here this time around whole world is standstill. So far, no vaccination. Do you think Q1 we can see further fall?
So, as I said, short term, we don't have a view. As I said previously, I don't know whether the recovery will be a V recovery, W recovery, or, people also talk about U, L, and all sorts of alphabets there. So short term, if you ask me what it would be next 3 months, 2 quarters, we don't have a view. As I said, markets, particularly during such uncertain times, are very volatile. They behave like a pendulum where they keep oscillating from one extreme to another extreme. I mean, we all just, it's hardly a few weeks back where the market started dropping from 42,000 and it came to, like 26, 27,000. At that point in time, people started talking, it will further go down and maybe we will see 6,000 Nifty or, Sensex at 22,000 and so on, and all sorts of justifications being given there. And then suddenly we saw without any change as such, where no major package being announced by the government, no change in terms of corporate, performance returning back to normalcy. The number of cases globally, domestically, everything going up, getting a bit more complicated day by day, the lockdown getting extended. But we saw market bouncing back from 26, 27,000 to again, 32,000 kind of a number. And as a fund house, to be very frank with you, we always look at long term as an indicator, and we believe we are in bottoms up approach where we invest in businesses rather than looking at short term market fluctuation and volatility. So don't have a view, but from a midterm perspective, from a year and beyond, we are quite hopeful and positive.
Sure. And the next question is from Karthik. In what way this credit AIFs different from bank or NBFC lending products?
Sure. So, when you go to a bank, bank has got certain credit norms. So they will talk about certain debt equity ratio to be followed. They will talk about certain DSCR. They will talk about the interest to be charged every month, to be paid every month. They will talk about the installments to be paid in a particular pre-agreed fashion. On working capital side, they would have norms for working capital, which is linked to the value of receivables or stock inventory you may carry and so on, right? So there is a certain regulatory framework around it. And also there's a regulatory framework in terms of the end use of money. So there are certain restrictions there and so on. When we compare this with NBFCs is slightly more flexible. So NBFC will say, I'm a bit more flexible compared to a bank in terms of end use of money. I'm a bit more flexible in terms of rating. I'm a bit more flexible in terms of the repayment schedule and so on. But NBFCs, which also are supported through bank credit lines, also needs regular cash flow. So if someone comes and says, okay, there's an opportunity to have a portfolio of 10 companies, I'm just taking a hypothetical example, and all these 10 companies want to give you security to your satisfaction. End use is fine. Rest of the boxes in terms of integrity, credibility, everything gets ticked. But I need this for 5 years. I will not be able to service you for first 3 years. I will not even service you your interest. Forget about principal repayment. I will start servicing you from beginning of 4th year onward, and I will repay you everything between 4th and 5th year. NBFC, which has got a leverage model, where they have 1 rupee of their own capital and another 3 rupee, 4 rupee coming from the banking system. This kind of a portfolio will have a very different credit rating and therefore their ability to get credit from the banking system. So out of 10 companies, I'm again putting a hypothetical example. Maybe they will agree for 2 companies. They may not agree for rest of the 8 companies because they need to look at their alignment of cash flows. Now, what AIF does is, AIF is completely flexible in terms of end use of capital, in terms of ratings, in terms of repayment schedule, in terms of security. There's no regulation which governs AIF credit. So banks, NBFCs are still being governed by the central bank, but AIF industry from a investment or a credit perspective is not governed by any regulator. So therefore we say it's a high risk, high reward kind of a model, and therefore the government has also put a minimum 1 crore participation for the investor to come in AIF structure, whereby they assume that segment of investor would understand what AIF means, what kind of risk profile they carry. So the objective which AIF serves on the credit side is very different from bank and NBFC. For AIF, they will say you need so much money for working capital. I'm ready to give it to you as working capital. It's okay if you don't have proportionate receivables and stock on your books. I'm fine with that. Nothing stops them from taking that decision. If someone says, I will start paying you only after 3 years, and till 3 years, I will not even pay you a single rupee, I will say, that's fine. I'm taking that credit call. I don't need cash for next 3 years. But I will price my risk premium accordingly. I'm taking relatively higher risk compared to NBFC, compared to a bank. So therefore, I need a premium. So if the bank is available at, say, 10%, NBFC may be available at 13, 15 kind of a number, AIF may be beyond that.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is only one last question. So would you like to take that question as well?
Sure.
So the question is from Naveen. You said that, like, he's referring to you, in the current scenario, many potential buyers have backed off their intended investment in few companies.
I lost you for a minute between.
Yeah, sure. Just a second. So the question is from Naveen. He's mentioning that in the current scenario, many potential buyers have backed out of their intended investment in few companies under IBC. Do you think it's an opportunity for distressed funds or private equities here?
Absolutely. I think it's a very big opportunity if you ask me. And lot of special situation funds, distress asset fund will turn aggressive. They will see larger volume of opportunities at good pricing at their terms. There's also one of the other reasons. So, we had IBC coming in 2016. And for all these funds to start opening up the shop in India, put a team in place, start evaluating opportunities, start disbursing, we have not seen significant disbursements happening till now because the IBC process was also slow. Some investments have happened, but the point I'm making is a lot of these funds are sitting on dry powder. So it's not that 80% of the corpus is invested and therefore they are not left with much money and therefore they want to focus on the current portfolio. That portfolio itself might be going through certain crises in this market and so on. That's not the case. So their ability to write check is certainly there. As I said, the only challenge could be some of them might be backed by the oil producing countries. And if those provider of capital turn over cautious and they want to revisit their commitments to some of this distress asset fund, that may limit their appetite. But I think it's a huge opportunity for the distress asset fund to get very aggressive and look for some of the best opportunities. I mean, since it's a last question, if you would have, some of us would have read Howard Marks' newsletter. He also believes a huge opportunity at the moment, the kind of stress we are seeing everywhere. Similarly, Warren Buffett keeps saying, one should be greedy when there's a fear on the street. And if the distress asset guy doesn't turn greedy now, other than waiting for the markets to completely get revived and then they start buying assets at the premium, the answer is certainly no. This is the time when they should start putting in big dollars. And I think it will happen. The only slight worry is, this IBC process at the moment has been stalled for 6 months. And if it gets extended for some reason, or the government comes up with a different regulation saying that because the crisis is all over, it will have impact on banks' balance sheets. So they want to dilute IBC. They want to dilute, powers of the bank taking companies to IBC. Maybe the volumes to some extent may get impacted, but otherwise a huge opportunity. And anyway, as I said, the quantum of money which was raised last year was around $11 to $12 billion. Out of $11, $12 billion, my sense is maybe 50% would have been raised for distress assets fund. So that's a very small number compared to the size of the opportunity that exists in the market.
Thank you, sir. That was the last question. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking, interacting with everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and stay safe.
Yeah, wish you the same, and wish every participant a good health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.